My name is Oghogho Effiom. I'm the Regional Director for Africa, Society of Petroleum Engineers, at SPE's Annual Technical Conference and Exhibition in Houston, Texas. Today is October 2nd, 2022, and I'm here with Egbert Imomoh, who was the first African to lead the Society of Petroleum Engineers as president in 2013. Egbert was chairman of African Energy Resources, but I got to know him when he was deputy managing director of Shell Nigeria, and later again as SPE president. I'm proud to call him a mentor and a leader. This recording is a part of AIME's Oral History Capture program. So Egbert, tell me where you grew up and how you grew up.
I grew up in Zaria. I was born in Zaria, in the northern part of Nigeria. My father was working in the Nigerian railways, and I went to my primary school in Zaria, a Catholic school in Zaria. And after that, I went to secondary school in Kaduna, also a Catholic school, because in those days, if you were a Catholic, you went to those Catholic schools. And St. John's College, Kaduna was the top secondary school then in the northern part of the country. After that, there were not too many schools then that did A-levels. If you talk to go to university in Nigeria, you have to do A-levels. So I decided to go to the east, to Enugu, a school called College of Immaculate Conception, where I did my A-levels. So I did 2 years there, got my A-levels. And at the end of it, or before that, I was wondering what to do with myself. In those days, the school curriculum and university curriculum ran differently. The secondary school ran from January to December, and the universities ran from September to August. So when you finished your A-levels, you had to go and get a job as a teacher or in industry. Now, I didn't want to teach because I thought I was going to be a lousy teacher, so I didn't want to teach. And as a matter of fact, I wanted to go and work in a brewery because I had a friend who was working in the brewery, and he told me that the best beer you could drink was the one you chocolately drew from the vats. And I said, that's where I want to go and work. So I said, I'm going to work in a brewery. Well, as God will have it, Shell at that time started thinking of its Nigerianization policy. So they went around the country to various schools, identifying potential students whom they could offer scholarships to study either engineering or geology. So they came to our school and identified 2 of us who were then offered sort of pre-scholarship work in Port Harcourt. So I didn't become a teacher, I didn't work in a brewery, I ended up working for Shell in Port Harcourt. That's what they call a pre-scholarship student. So that's sort of my early introduction into the industry.
Was that what the influence was to study engineering?
No, no. Before then, if you ask first of all, my father died very young. My father died when I was 14, so my mother sort of brought us up. And they always said I was always fiddling with things. Whether there was a broken radio, a watch that was broken, anything that was broken, I thought I could fix. That sort of messing around, sort of put it in my mind that I could do some engineering. But also I found maths and physics very easy. So that was my attraction to that side of study, to do physics and maths and then to do engineering.
What about your professors? Did they have an influence, or classmates influence you in your studies?
No. As a matter of fact, my father wanted me to be a doctor. So in a way, probably if he was alive, I would have been forced to study medicine. But I tell you what happened. In those days, to do biologic practicals, you had to go out into the fields to go and hunt for frogs. You got the frogs and you did sections. And I said, why am I messing around with these frogs? So that killed my interest in medicine. So I never looked at medicine. So in a way, I had to fashion what I wanted to do in my life because my mother hadn't had any formal education. So I myself had to sort of think through what it is I wanted to do and decide that I was going to do engineering and study maths, study physics and chemistry, but not biology.
Definitely not biology. If I look around the world today, there are some conflicts. There's a war going on. There are socio-political events. We are being heavily influenced by civil societies and society in general, especially regarding like the climate change concerns and the agreements and all the initiatives. But I would like to ask, what political or cultural events affected your studies?
When I was in university, Nigeria went through a civil war. By the way, I studied in the University of Birmingham, so I was not in the country when the war started. I mentioned earlier on that my mother and my brothers and sisters were in Zaria when the conflict started. So they had to relocate from Zaria to our village, which is Nagenebode in Edo State. So they had to leave Zaria and leave everything I had. So I wasn't in Nigeria during the conflict. So I was a student in the UK when the Nigerian Civil War broke out. But then I came back before the war ended, 1968. I came back and I was working in Warri during the conflicts and actually went through some of the issues of civil war. There was a Swedish Count van Rossum, I don't know whether you remember his name, he was firing these little minicons. And one of the things he wanted to do was to stop oil activities in the western region, because although the conflicts were in the east, those of us in the west were still working, drilling, walkover work. So when we knew, or when we suspected that he was going to come and attack the rigs, everything was shut down. I went into wherever it was, the bar, and kept ourselves busy. I'm not going to tell you how we kept ourselves busy during the war, but we kept ourselves busy. And that kept us away from conflict. So I saw a bit of it, bit of the conflict, but not directly.
Yes, because I mean, I've heard from students who've had to change universities mid-course and so on. So that's why I thought to ask that this is not new. This probably has been happening for some time, and these are the realities that we have to face. So I'm going to take a different approach and ask about your early foray into the industry, and I think you've talked a little bit about it already. But tell me about your first job. What were you doing, and what challenges did you face?
Okay, let's go back. I told you I studied mechanical engineering at university. Shell then ran a training program in Holland. It was a 5 months intensive program where they converted us, those who were mechanical engineers, to petroleum engineers. So we did reservoir engineering, petrophysics, mixing mud, drilling activities. So I did that for 5 months, from July 1968 to end of 1968, when I then went back to Nigeria. The job was called a well-site petroleum engineer. And indeed, you are supposed to be responsible for making sure the mud was in good shape. You did all the penetration log, you supervised all the logging activities, you ran all the casing and all of that. So that was my first job. On the schedule, which was, if I recall, it was 12 days out of Warri and 4 days off. None of this thing they do now, 1 week on, 1 week off. You were there for 12 days and you had 12 days off. So I really felt responsible. But I tell you one thing that struck me. I told you we had this training in Holland. And we had a little laboratory where we mixed mud. And then I was tossed to the rig, and I said I was responsible for mixing mud. And I said, where's the mud? From mixing mud in little cups like this, I was now responsible for mixing mud in huge tanks. I said, am I responsible for that? I said, yeah, that's your job. So I said, okay. So can you imagine translating what you learned mixing the little chemicals in a little cup to now responsible for this huge tank mixing mud for drilling? So we did that. I enjoyed it because I was responsible. Shell had a way of making you responsible. They gave you a job, you were responsible. There are no two ways about it. But I also learned that you have to have the flexibility of mind to learn from those who know better than you do. we didn't have much of we had what they call a penetration log. You know, you took how much time the bit took to penetrate, and then you plotted it, and I gave you whether you were going through shale or sand or mud and all of that. Of course, I'd never done it in my life. So I looked around, I asked the radio operator, can you teach me how to do this? I said, oh, God, that's not my job. My job is a radio operator. I said, who is going to teach me this job? But anyway, fortunately for me, one of the senior well-site petroleum engineers came along and taught me how to do it. So I learned. So what taught me is that you have to have the flexibility of mind to learn from anybody who can teach you. You got to face challenges and be able to scale up, if you can say that way, from whatever you learn from a small Mickey Mouse mixing of muds to mixing mud in a tank. So those are some of the early challenges.
Fantastic. That's a good segue into my next question, which is about your influences, your sponsors, your mentors. Who were those that really helped to identify your talent or help you cover those gaps as you rose through the ranks?
Well, fortunately, before I left to study in the UK, I met a gentleman who, Aret, you probably heard about him. He eventually became the MD of NNPC. And we come from the same part of the country. So I always looked at him as a mentor. So when I came back to the country, he was already moved up a little bit in Shell. So he took me under his umbrella. The do's and don'ts. And it's not just the work ethics, but the ethical way of doing things. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They said, look, Egbert, we are petroleum, and we're quite proud to be petroleum engineers in the industry. He said, look, Egbert, this is what we do. Don't mess around with this, don't mess around with that. And those little snippets have stayed with me for a long, long time. What you should do and you should not do. And it hasn't done me any harm over time. It was a fantastic sense of humor. Fantastic sense of humor. And, it's never a dull moment. It was not a very tall man, but very full of activity, full of movement, full of life, full of life. Really, but main thing was a great sense of humor. Very good. And committed, really dedicated person, yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit about your experience within Shell. You held many technical positions. You worked in Shell for 37 years, and you rose through the ranks. Which role would you say was the most rewarding or had the most impact on propelling you forward?
The very first one when I left the well site, after 18 months, I got fed up. I told her, look, I don't want to do this job anymore. I'm not learning anything new. So after 18 months, yeah, I want to move. So they gave me a job what they called an operations engineer. An operations engineer, you're actually running the activities of a number of rigs. You do the programming, you do the ordering of materials, you're supervising everything that goes on that rig. And boy, it stretched me. It's not like now where you use all these modcoms to communicate. It was HF radio. So the rigs would call you any time of day or night. I would then leave where I was staying to go to the office, take the call, go back to my little flat, have as much sleep as I could, and then get back to the office in the morning to actually record by radio what has happened in those rigs overnight, like a daily broadcast. That daily broadcast then formed the basis of operational reports. It was tough, I can tell you. As a young man, I didn't have much freedom. I couldn't do things that fellow young men were doing. It stretched you quite a bit, but I enjoyed it because it was my first job of responsibility, looking after the rigs, looking also after people who were then well-site engineers, so reporting to me directly. And then also, you had immediate contact with your bosses because of this daily drilling report which you had to render to the bosses. Okay.
Yes. So they would have to come to you and they had to listen to you all the time.
That's it.
That was quite early. Okay, I can see why that would have a good impact. But again, when I looked at your background, you spent quite a number of years in the petroleum engineering discipline, and you eventually became the petroleum engineering manager. Then you moved to being a divisional manager. So I became curious to find out from you what helped you switch from being a purely technical leader to being one that needed to have more managerial skills and more strategic skills.
I didn't have a choice. I was thrown in the deep end and I had to learn to swim very, very quickly. My very nature was not one of socializing. Divisional manager jobs in those days, there was a lot of external work that went with it. And my nature was purely technical. What's the problem? How do you solve it? So I didn't have much of what I call the social contacts, dealing with communities, dealing with contractors. They never really had any interest in that. But something came up and some movements that didn't materialize, and I then got a call saying, hey, you're going back to Port Harcourt to become a divisional manager. And so I did. The transition was not easy. But then you learn, you have to learn. And sometimes what is not natural to you, you struggle with it. But a few things helped me, which I think is very, very important. I played squash. I played golf. I played hockey, which meant that those are what I call cells, which you can then interact with different people and then create a relationship outside the technical area. So I think those things helped. Also, I was very lucky that my wife, who had studied English and French, virtually didn't do any work, because those divisional jobs, there's a lot of high social interaction with people. And your wife actually plays a very, very important role in that job. She eventually didn't have a career of her own. And that helped us a lot to then handle both the technical and social community type job that comes with a divisional manager's job. Eventually, I found it very, very exciting because I met some of my best friends doing that job. Very, very deep friendship that has lasted for a long time.
You obviously were really busy, and then you had a lot of experience, and you just talked about even not just a technical, but even a social calendar that you had to manage. And you did that for many years, but at some point, you began to conceive of the idea to found AFREN. AFREN is a Pan-African independent oil and gas company, which you founded. And I know that there are a few people who might be listening here that might want to do something similar. So what steps would you advise a young petroleum engineer who has dreams of owning his or her own company?
A point of correction. When I left the divisional job, I then took on the job as a deputy managing director,
Yes.
which I did for 5 years. I retired on that job. Then Shell then gave me a 2-year contract working in London. If you remember, in those days, that was the height of the Ogoni crisis, and had a very small office of fairly experienced people who could then take the Shell story to anywhere in the world. I've been to the British Parliament, I came to Senate here, spoke to NGOs, so people who knew the country and knew what the issues were. That was the job I was doing in London. I did that job till November 2004. That was when I was approached to join AFREN. I had retired from Shell then, so that came as a post-retirement job, which was quite exciting. So, and the idea then of AFREN was because there were a lot of undeveloped assets, small assets. And the idea was that we'll take one of these or two of these, apply technology, apply capital to it, and then bring production to life. That's how our friend started. It was after my retirement, not whilst I was with Shell.
But things have changed. There are younger and younger people who want to work for, let's say, 10 years, 15 years, and they want to start up their own companies, even oil companies. Given all your experience, what would you advise?
Well, to tell you frankly, knowing what I know now, I probably would have started this forming a small company earlier. Why do I say so? It can make a lot of difference to you if you succeed. But if you fail as well, it can also make a lot of difference. You will look on the success side. What do I mean by that? I meant by that, when I was in Shell, Deputy Managing Director, I had a lot of people working for me. If I had a legal issue, I had a legal department. I had a finance department, and a HR department, planning departments. Now, when you form a small company, you are the legal person, you are the finance person, you're sort of everything. And that actually broadens your knowledge, broadens your exposures, and broadens the impact you can have on what you are doing. And the bottom line, you can see very, very quickly your influence on the bottom line. If you're in a large organization, I used to joke that some of the communities had more impact on the bottom line because they could shut in wells than I could do as a deputy managing director. So it's a completely different ball game. Now, the advantage I would say that people want to jump ship, watch when you jump ship, because when you jump ship, you may not know how deep that water is, and you don't know whether you should have gone in with some life jacket or not. I mean by that is experience, which I garnered as working from Shell, all the training, all the exposure, and all of that, which of course plays a big role. Because I've seen some people who never had that experience, and you can see them struggling. To my experience, get as much experience as you can on the majors, get some solid training, solid exposure, and then, if you wish, when you have the courage, strike out. Because if you succeed, it can make you a very, very successful person.
Thank you. That's really good. So what was your experience like schooling in the UK, especially having to leave Nigeria and leave your mom, who was by that time a widow? And
it was a fascinating experience. I mean, Shell organized everything. We landed in London, and you had to go to a school or had to eat with properly cutlery, and knife, spoon on your right side, fork on your left side, just to make sure we didn't make a fool of ourselves eating. Then went to Birmingham. Unfortunately for me, I couldn't find a place of residence in the hall of residence, which made transition for me very difficult. I then had to go and live with a family, a young couple, and then what they call digs. I don't know what the equivalent is in American system.
Foster family.
With a family. And I lived there for a while, but I never really liked it. And I give you a story. The first few nights, you negotiate the terms. And I thought I had a deal whereby I had breakfast and dinner. And lo and behold, I thought I understood the English language very well, but I soon found out that I didn't quite understand the English language. So I went back to the digs the first night, expecting supper. Sitting in my room from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, suddenly the lady comes up with a cup of Ovaltine or Bonvita, whatever it's equivalent to. Or chocolate with 2 biscuits. I said, is this dinner? I said, Second day, the same thing happened. So I went back and I said, what's this? This lady is shortchanging me. I said, no, what is your deal? So I agreed that I will have Supper. Ah, says, okay, that's a difference between dinner and supper. One is a full-fledged meal, the other one is 2 biscuits and a cup of chocolate. So I said, my word, it's okay. Now I understand. I will then go and have my meal at the university before going back. The second one, if you go to Birmingham, if you think English is one common language, you need to go to some of the places. You find that when they speak, you've got to listen very carefully. And you go to Birmingham, they call themselves the Brummies. And when they speak English, you have to listen. So here was I with my solid Nigerian accent, speaking Nigerian English to them. I said, pardon. They would speak Brummy to me. I said, pardon. So there's a little bit of pardon going up and down between me and them. But eventually, I found some fantastic relationships in there. And even till today, some of the friends we formed there, we still meet every year. I mean, this last summer, I was in the UK, and 3 of us or 4 of us got together with families. Now these are all grandmamas and grandpapas getting together and having a drink together. So we've formed some relationships that have lasted for, I don't know, 50 years. So it was very enjoyable, very enjoyable.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go back into your career, and I would like to ask, what are some of the biggest non-technical challenges you experienced?
You know, when you ask me, it's a very difficult question, but a couple of them. One is that when I was general manager, you're more or less like the father and mother of we lived in camps then, father and mother of the camp, which meant that you enjoy the joyful moments and enjoy the sad moments. Joyful moments when people had children or celebrating birthdays, but sad moments when you probably had to go and break news of deaths, particularly deaths arising from operations. Those I found very, very difficult, because here was I. Well, I was relatively young then. I was early 40s. I say relatively young then. And yet, here was I sort of carrying the load of like the father of the camp. So those issues I found very, very, very difficult. And then also, unfortunately, that's when all this kidnapping nonsense started. When people started taking people for ransom. And I found it really, really painful that your staff would be taken and you wouldn't know when him or her would be released, what terms and what conditions would be demanded. But fortunately, throughout my stay, we were very firm in not paying any ransoms, and people were actually released. And I tell you a story once that this was in Warri. The camp was close to a riverfront, and for some reason, this man and the wife and a little girl decided to have a Sunday afternoon close to the waterfront. They came with a speedboat and picked up this little girl, took her away, and of course, I was panic. What would they do? So I was very calm. I said, forget it. They were shocked. I said, Mr. Moore, what do you mean forget it? I said, forget it. So what do you mean? I said, look, tell me which Nigerian woman would take a 5-year-old expatriate child and not know what to do with her. I said, watch it. That child is going to come back. Lo and behold, the child didn't know what to eat, Gary Eba, didn't know what to do. And the wives of the women then said, go back, take the child back. We don't know what to do with her. Take her back. They came back. I mean, we can tell this story now, but you can imagine the trauma which those parents went through. But I just saw it and said, just fine, nothing will happen. I'm not sure about now because people have gotten more vicious, more demanding. But then I said, no, nothing will happen. And nothing did happen. So those are trying moments, and what I call personal moments where you had to actually share, particularly the misery that comes with deaths, fatalities, or what I just mentioned about picking up hostages.
Yeah. Yes, trying times still continue in the industry. So,
Well, you say that, but at some stage I found that people began to accept it.
normalize it.
Normalize it. It becomes like a statistics. Oh, they've taken another one. I said, no, it's not another one. It's not another one. It's another father, another husband, another. So you have to look at it in those light. But people thought it was statistics. Oh, well, no, they took one last week, another one. I said, not
People
acceptable.
behind these numbers.
It became a number. I said, no, not with me. Not a number.
Thanks for sharing that. Let's change gears a little bit to, things that might have brought you some more joy, such as awards. Is there any you can think of, or any honors you received that just still sticks out?
Of course, in Shell, we got all kinds of awards. And I remember getting the Distinguished Members Award of SPE. And I tell you a story, I didn't know what it was all about. And then we came to one of those conferences, I can't remember what town it was now. They said, we're going to have rehearsals to get the Distinguished Members Award. So I said, rehearsals for what? Just give me my award, I'll go. I said, no, Mr. Imomoh, you have to come for rehearsals. I said, no, I don't need to do a rehearsal. Well, no rehearsals, no award. I said, okay, I'm coming. I said, I'm coming. Now, why I mentioned is that when you are aloof and not part of an organization and things are working like clockwork, you don't know what goes behind the scene. It's only when I got that award that I recognized when you sit in the audience and you see everything go like clockwork, that there are things that are happening which you don't know. Because I didn't realize that when they actually read your CV, they told me that when they read your CV, at a certain point, you have to stop on the line on the stage. Now, because members in the audience don't see that line. So I never knew what was happening. And I can tell you that that little experience has sort of governed my life now, where if I'm organizing any event, we have to do rehearsals. Because that makes it look so perfect, like clockwork.
Flawless, yes.
Otherwise, you go there, anything can happen and things don't work as well as you want.
So that's a good.
And also, I got the honorary award as well. That was one that I didn't even know how they put it all together. But some people thought I deserved it, and so thank God.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
Because we're going to talk a little bit more about your experience in SPE, especially being the first African to hold the position of the SPE president. So what was that like? And can you share some highlights from it?
Let's go back. I told you I studied mechanical engineering and then trained as a petroleum engineer. What struck me is that I knew I couldn't then go the professional route and get registered as a mechanical engineer because I was not practicing as a mechanical engineer. There are some of my friends and colleagues in the industry who had studied in America and knew about the SPE. So they decided that we were going to form the SPE in Lagos in 1973. And we then formed the SPE. I think I was financial secretary, or I don't know what position I had. Some position as financial secretary, or I think there's a position as financial secretary in there. So I took that position. And that's what then started my interest in SPE. Now, where could I find knowledge? Where could I be exposed to new things that are happening in the industry where I was? So that was SPE. We started in 1973. And from there, I became various other positions in SPE. And then, the African region used to be part of Europe. It used to be part of Europe. And then suddenly I got a call from somebody, I think it was John Colligan, says, Egbert, we just, they're thinking of forming a new region in Africa. Were you interested? I know, sounds very interesting. Why not? So I was invited then and became the first regional director for Africa. And it was tough then because I was then deputy managing director. So it was not easy to combine being a director for Africa, traveling, for board meetings and do it. So it was difficult trying to combine. And then also people now take things where I see you have your laptop here. In those days, there was no Wi-Fi or laptop or email and anything. You had to carry your files with you wherever you went. So when I came back from SPE conference, I had to sit and catch up with work for God knows how long. So it was tough trying to combine it, but we did it. And somewhere along the line, we navigated a way that allowed us to combine those two jobs. Very exciting time, And I always told people, sitting on that board, you're getting really free advice from 22 wise men and women, which is not easy to come by. So it was really not only technical but geographic. This one you have this whole regional experience coming in, and the whole idea of the internationalization of SPE started in its earnest. So that was also exciting times.
Yes. Yeah. I think I share your excitement about it being, also from the Lagos section that is celebrating 50 years next year, 2023. And I can also relate to how much work it is as a regional director and you hold a full-time job. So I can definitely relate with how it's really challenging.
You haven't got any gray hairs yet.
That you know of.
So you're handling it better than I am.
That you know of. There's technology at this.
You're handling the job better than I did. I got gray hairs when I was much younger.
Indeed. So, but yes, I can definitely relate with that. And I would like to, and we'll talk a little bit about recommendations to young people. But for now, I want to hear how your involvement in SPE evolved over time.
Okay, that was then, I think I was then regional director 2002. So it went beyond my retirement. And I was still coming to conference because once you become a regional director, you form personal relationships. I was still coming to ATC. And behold, I was invited to go and shoot a video about being SPE president. It's okay. You want to shoot a video? I'll shoot a video, which we then did. And then ask you questions. I think about 13 questions or thereabouts. So what you want to do, your vision for SPE. So which we did. And that went through the nominations committee. And then suddenly I got a call. You're going to be the next SPE president. Oh, wow. Then I was working for Aret, which was good for a small company like that to have one of your founding members to become SPE president was good. So they gave me full support, traveling. I mean, not like COVID where you couldn't travel. We traveled all over the world, some exciting places, and which went very well. So thank God it happened then, and the company was able to support the travel, the time as well, so which I remain very grateful to the end of any day in my life. Yeah. And
I see you're still very, very passionate about SPE. You still support. You came to the board meeting today. You gave a presentation from the SPE Foundation. So it's definitely a passion of yours.
Well, the thing is that if I do something, I either do it or I don't do it. I don't know to be half passionate about something. I don't know. It's like my playing golf. I'm passionate about playing golf. I can't be half passionate about something. So yeah, I've enjoyed it, and it's funny. You talk about SPE. A friend of mine saw me after the last conference in Lagos, and said somebody told me they saw Egbert at the SPE conference. Yeah, he said, yeah, he's there. So even when he turns 90, he'll still be coming to SPE conferences. I said, God, let me be 90, then I will still be coming to SPE conferences.
That would be something to see.
So I enjoy it. And the thing is that I enjoy meeting young people. You meet different people all the time, excited.
What were your favorite memories or travels from your SPE presidency? Or did you have any particularly memorable sections or activities that you embarked on?
The ones I really enjoyed was visiting the student sections. It was, each time you went, they really were excited about having the president come and visit them. And they went out of the way to make your presence most welcome. And you got the feeling that they looked forward to the president's visit. And therefore, each time I went to a country, I always made sure that I had a visit to the student section. But thinking back, one of the ones who really enjoyed, we went to India. I hadn't been to India for a long time. And the then director from India arranged for us to have a super duper dinner at one of these big palaces. And he stood up and said, well, the last time this palace was open to anybody was when President so-and-so from America, I don't want to mention the name, came to visit. And they don't actually open that place. So I stood up and said, well, do you know what? I mean, you're even better because today we have 3 presidents. Incoming president, current president, and past presidents. You're entertaining 3 presidents in this roof. So I thought I would make that point. My wife and I enjoyed going to Peru. Something about Peru was very idyllic country, pretty country, a lot to see. And then we went to Venezuela. And Venezuela was a mixture of 2 things. The sadness of what had happened to that country. And I always joke that when I went to Venezuela, some of you remember the type of old cars we used to see in Warri in those days were still in Venezuela because the place had been run down. And recently I gave a talk about Nigeria industry. I said, well, let's be careful that we don't go down that route. Because the resources under the ground do not necessarily make you rich. Those resources do not make a country rich. It's how you manage, how you harness those resources, how you bring them into production. That's what translates into a country being rich. And I just hope that, our dear country doesn't go down that route. So those are sort of little snippets of what we enjoyed. And clearly, students, I enjoyed visiting the student section and 1 or 2 countries that we just mentioned. Yeah.
Awesome.
Good.
If you were to recommend SPE to a young graduate, what would you tell him or her about it?
Do you know, there's so much knowledge in SPE, so much you can get out of it. But it shouldn't be a one-way traffic. You should also be thinking of what you give back to SPE. And it's strange that I met the incoming president of SPE from Dallas, and I visited him when I was SPE president. And he said he remembers what I told him when I visited Dallas. He said, SPE is you, and you are SPE. So it's a two-way thing. Not just what you get out of SPE, so what you also give back to SPE makes a lot of difference. Give back by volunteering your time. Give back by, if you have somebody who writes papers. I never wrote papers because I'm mostly operational types. But, attending conferences, galvanizing activities. There are various ways in which we can give something to SPE. To think about that, not just what do I get out of it. It has to be give and take. Give and take.
I do agree. And I tell people, you get as much as you give.
Sure.
So as much as you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. If you put minimal effort into it, you get minimal, benefit from it.
Sure.
But how has that membership benefited your career?
It's difficult to say. I mean, per se, for me, my knowledge base broadened. But I don't think that Shell looked at me and said, okay, your membership of SPE gives you a leg up for the next job. It never worked like that. And I don't think that's the way it should work. It's what you yourself garner from being it. How does it affect your knowledge base? How does it affect your interrelationship with other people? Those are the kind of things you get. But I cannot say, trying to say, well, SPE has maybe get a promotion from this job to that job. Thinking back, not really. Not really.
I can relate to that. But in your own opinion, how do you think we can attract young people into the industry now?
It's tough. It's really tough now. What I mean by that is that here is an industry where a lot of people say that it's sunset time. In 30 years' time, all you have, all the internal combustion engines kaput. Everything we'll do is either wind, solar, or hydro. And then you're going to say to yourself, as a young man, is that the industry I want to go into? But what I tell people that, zero net emission doesn't mean zero production of oil and gas. This world will continue to need oil and gas for a long time to come. And if anything, it might be even more difficult because now the terrain which you are going to be operating is more difficult. The process of extracting what is left is going to be more demanding than when I joined, where you just drill, perforate, production, drill, perforate, production. So I think that the knowledge base is going to be more demanding. I don't think the industry is going to face sunset, even beyond the 30 years we'll talk about stopping internal combustion engines. I can still see that, at least in some parts of the world, let's get it quite correct as well, that there are parts of the world which are not yet ready. And the pace is going to be different. So I think somewhere like Nigeria and some of the developing worlds will still need a lot of oil and gas to bring their standard of living up to the standard of living of the Western world. Because those people also have a right to increase their standard of living and not just quench their industry. Sorry to use my Nigerian language, question their industry, because other parts of the world that have benefited from it now say, no, we can't produce because it's causing environmental issues.
So what advice would you give to today's young leaders in the engineering profession?
Well, clearly, you need to know more than just your industry. You need to know all things issued around society. You need to be politically aware of what is happening around the world. The whole issue about the IT world, the use of IT as a tool to help you is going to be quite dominant in what people are doing, probably more than when in my own time. And the world is getting more global. Got to be alert what's happening. Got to stay in tune with what's happening. And create room to learn other things. I agree that, the whole issue about the environment, solar and all of that will continue. So if you just bury your head in a barrel of oil and think that's the whole of the energy mix, you'll be in for a surprise. The energy mix is changing. So your knowledge base has to change as well to match that energy mix.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have any regrets regarding the career you chose and where it has taken you? Or anything you wish you could have done differently?
Not at all. I told you I wanted to be a doctor. My dad wanted me to be a doctor, but I'm not sure I could have stood the sight of blood and all of that. I feel satisfied. My career has been. If I was planning, I don't think I could have planned any differently. I joined as a very young engineer. I had all the opportunities in Shell. I had the opportunities to grow in Shell. Left Shell, formed a new company. That company then took off, and then unfortunately something happened that brought it crashing down. We learned from that. Here I am, still busy, involved in a number of non-oil things, involved in a number of companies as directors of companies, still busy, meeting people like you, young people like you at conferences. So I feel satisfied. I don't have any regrets at all. I mean, the only thing I said, if what I now know I knew 8 years ago, maybe I would jump ship and not follow the career that I did to become deputy managing director. Create something new, something fresh, and make really successful. Because I've seen some people who have done it, and I really said, maybe that's what I should have done. But never mind. So,
you didn't too badly yourself.
I haven't.
That's good. You said something, I just want us to talk about it a little bit. It got me curious when you talked about learning from the mistakes that the company Afrin had made. Is there anything you'd like to share?
Well, it's a very delicate matter, but you see, I am one person, I don't know how to half trust people. I trust you or I don't trust you. If I don't trust you, I don't do business with you, period. And if I trust you, then I trust you totally. I think what happened was maybe one trusted fully and totally, and eventually that trust was misused, abused, and caused problems that were not necessary for the company. I think also people should learn to be satisfied with what they get in life. If you always look into your neighbor's garden, always greener than yours, then of course you never have time to look at yours. So if you don't mind, I mean, it's an issue. I wouldn't want to go any more deep.
No, and we don't necessarily need to, but I think it's just a note of one. And you mentioned it earlier when you said if you succeed, it's very good opportunity. If you don't, it's also at great cost to yourself. But
our lack of success was not technical. It was just a purely mismanagement of a situation. Because we're doing very well technically. I mean, the two companies we were managing had assets which had not been performing well. They started performing well, but just took a decision that was wrong.
And that was why I asked about non-technical challenges, because I find that, with technology and with all the knowledge, you really can get the technical things right. We've got all this knowledge base. We are a global community. Even if you just learn from SPE, you will figure out the technical things. But nobody really prepares you for some non-technical challenges that can actually make a big difference. And that's what I have seen in my experience.
They call it corporate governance these days.
Absolutely. Whether it's the political, whether it's the commercial, and all those other things around that are not non-technical stuff.
Yeah.
Those are the things that really, I think we as technical people tend to get sidelined by those kind of experiences. And that's why I just wanted you to talk a little bit about it. And that's really enough to just to keep it at the back of our minds that it's something that we should definitely be thinking about.
Well, clearly there are all kinds of things that help you now. I mean, good corporate governance. You can have all kinds of programs that teach you corporate governance. But I always tell people, the best corporate governance you have is what your conscience tells you should do and not do. If you have a conscience which is implanted in you by, some people say, I believe in divine intervention, people know what is right and wrong. They pretend sometimes they don't know what is right and wrong. They know. Most people do. And if you take instances where companies have failed, it's not because they didn't know what was right or wrong. Some of them knew.
And did it anyway.
Took a shortcut or thought they could do something and not get caught. And I remember, do you remember Mahmoud Stewart? He was EMP coordinator. He said something many years ago. He said, if you're about to do something as a senior executive in the company, ask yourself, if that issue appears in front of the Financial Times tomorrow, how would you like it? How would you respond? And what does that mean? It exposes you to the world. If you feel comfortable that what you're about to do is known by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1,000 people, are you okay with it? You're okay. But most times people say, just me and you. Just me and OG. Me and OG, nobody else knows about it. That's when it will go wrong. They think they can get away with it, and quite often they get caught. So many times they get caught.
Indeed.
They get caught out, let me put it that way.
I
think that's what I'll tell young people. And I'll tell them, don't look for shortcuts as well. Usually shortcuts are full of all kinds of things that you're not even thinking about. So do things properly. Do things properly.
What a fascinating career you've had. and a life. I've learned a lot from this interaction. It's been a pleasure to spend this time with you. Thank you so much again for your willingness to share your story with AIME.
Thank you.